What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is part of a series where I focus on a specific director and rank that director's work from worst to best. Done such directors in the past, such as David Lynch, Wes Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson. The list goes on. You guys can check out my director playlist down below. But guys, you clicked on this video, so you know this time around I'm focusing on Andrei Tarkovsky's films and ranking them from worst to best. Now keep in mind, if you're new to the channel, this will not include any TV movies, short movies, music videos, none of that. Just specifically feature-length films. And in the case of Andrei Tarkovsky, he did 7. So I'll be ranking his work from 7 being his worst to 1 being his best, and of course, my personal opinion. Now that being said, speaking of opinions, your list will definitely be different from mine and vice versa, and that's the great thing about this. And I'm very curious to hear your guys' ranking of Andrei Tarkovsky's films because he's an auteur. So I will be very curious to hear your guys' ranking down below. But guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. So kicking things off, number 7, we have Ivan's Childhood. So this was his first film. And this is definitely a film that you can see early on that he was someone that had a voice. And this film is his shortest, I believe. And despite it being short, it does feel a little bit long. I enjoyed this film to an extent, but I gotta say, I appreciate more the filmmaking than anything. Like, it's very well shot, it's very well acted. Like I said, I mean, the look of the film, it's black and white pretty much, and it's really good stuff. Production design's good. Like, the filmmaking is there. I just found myself to be very much so detached from pretty much everything. So while watching it, did kind of feel laborious. But that being said, again, I didn't mind this movie. I thought it was all right, and I can definitely see if some people have this higher up on the list. But for me, it was my number 7 slot. Next up, my number 6 is Andrei Rublev, and I know I mispronounced that, and I apologize. Doing this video, I knew I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have a difficult time pronouncing this. But this movie I saw, what was it, about 4 or 5 years ago? Yeah, and it's a very long film, and you can definitely feel the length. I'm not gonna lie, but that being said, just like Ivan's Childhood, this is a film that you can tell he's even stronger here in terms of his directing than Ivan's Childhood. Like, Ivan's Childhood came out in 1962, and Andrei Rublev came out in 1966, so 4 years later. So he was, giving even more in terms of, like, his strength and everything in terms of his directing. And holy cow, the production design, the costume design, the makeup, the cinematography, the sound design. I mean, the sound design, I think that was the big thing that I noticed about this film while watching it, is that Tarkovsky has this thing where most of, if not all of his movies have it, where there's like dripping. And I think that that's something that's fascinating because it almost acts as if it's like part of the score, which, as many of you probably know, he is someone that doesn't really have scores in his films. So it's kind of interesting how he uses nature to kind of almost emulate a score in a film. So I might give this film a second chance down the road, but the big thing for me is just when I look at that length, I'm like, do I want to watch it a second time? And not most of the time, I'm just like, yeah, no. But who knows? Maybe a couple of years from now, I'll change my mind and I'll revisit it. But as it stands, I like this a little bit more than Ivan's Childhood, and that's why it's my number 6. Next up, my number 5, we have Nostalgia, which came out in 1983. This is a film that I saw recently, and I have to say, I really, really liked the cinematography. I know that that's like something that I'm mentioning about, Andrei Tarkovsky's work. And truthfully, this is not going to be the final time that you hear me mention the word cinematography with Tarkovsky. His films have such a unique look to them. And I have to say, Nostalgia especially had a unique look to it because during the flashback scenes and during the present day scenes, there's a different look to each sequence. And I liked that about it. It feels very invigorating, if you will. Like, watching it, I could tell, holy cow, a lot of thought went into this and everything, especially because it was shot on film. But what was especially impressive was the opening scene. Holy cow, the opening scene was incredible. I can only imagine how many takes it took to get everything perfect, but it's a long take, and that's the other thing. Tarkovsky is known for his long takes, and I definitely appreciate that. But I will say, I wasn't as engaged by the film after that. And I think that probably set the stage a little bit too high for me in terms of like, oh, this is the bar. But the rest of the movie, it's fine. But the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes, I was intrigued by. But everything in between, I was kind of like, indifferent to. But nonetheless, I did like this a little bit more than the other 2 entries. And that's why it is my number 5. Next up, my number 4 is The Sacrifice, which came out in 1986. And this was his final film. And I have to say, this is where we get into the nitty gritty, like the ones where I'm like, yeah, I can 100% see myself rewatching all of these films. Like, all the other ones I mentioned, I'm like kind of on the fence on if I'm going to revisit them. But here, I can tell you The Sacrifice, I definitely will revisit because this film, yes, it does have some DNA with like nostalgia where it's like, a long take opening scene and then a long take ending. Yeah, but here's the thing. The Sacrifice has those two sequences blowing my mind. Like my jaw literally dropped, no joke, with the opening like 10 minutes. It was like a 10-minute long take. And then the ending scene, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the ending scene to The Sacrifice 100% inspired a certain sequence in There Will Be Blood. I'm not going to say what happens in The Sacrifice, but all I can say is, wow. And I know it sounds like I'm hyping it up, but just wow. It's truly incredible. And it's like, that is how he ended his filmography. You got to give the man props. Like, he ended it on that sequence. Those sequences are why I know I will be revisiting this film. Now, the thing is this, it is long. It's like 2.5 hours, but I definitely can see myself revisiting this film. And who knows, this might go up on my list, like even higher. But for now, I'm putting it as my number 4. Definitely. If the other movies that I mentioned, if they might not be something that you watch and you might not like, 100% watch The Sacrifice. I think it might click. I like this quite a bit. Didn't love it, but I like it quite a bit, and that's why it's my number 4. Next up, my number 3, we get into the ones that I own. My number 3 is Solaris. So Solaris is, 166 minutes long. It's a long film, and it definitely feels its length, and it definitely requires a lot of patience. And I would highly also recommend to watch it probably in like the middle of the day. Because the later on at night that you're going to watch this film, the more likely it is that you're probably going to doze off. Just the bottom line. But on a full night's rest, in the middle of the day, it's an ideal experience. It's very well shot. It's very well acted. Has a lot to say. You can definitely tell that Tarkovsky was inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey in the best of ways. Don't get me wrong, in terms of comparing and contrasting, I would definitely take 2001: A Space Odyssey 100% over this one. But as it stands, Solaris is still a good film, and I definitely will be revisiting it. That's why I own it on Blu-ray. I blind bought this film, and I'm glad that I did, because it is a good film. And yeah, that's why it's my number 3. Next up, my number 2 is The Elusive Mirror. It's not called Elusive Mirror, it's just called Mirror, but this is a film that I deem as very elusive because I've seen it twice now, and both times that I watched it, I had a different reaction to it, and I think that is the sign of a good film, at least for me personally, because a lot of times when I watch like some of my favorite films, it's like, yeah, I have the same reaction where it's like, oh, that's great, or oh, it grows on me over time. But like, I also love it when I get something out of it like a little bit differently than I did the past viewing. And Mirror is definitely an example of that because it's a film that is in and out of like past, present, dreams and whatnot. And that's what really kind of kept me engaged. And this is only 106 minutes, so it's on the shorter side of Tarkovsky. And I think that's also something that was a bit stronger about this film, was the length. I'm not going to lie, I don't love this film, but I do think that this is a good film. And similar to Solaris and The Sacrifice, I can definitely see like another viewing or two will make it even better for me. And I like it a little bit more than Solaris, obviously. It's why it's my number 2. But it is definitely a film that you need to watch for the sheer fact that it is a beautiful film. But definitely have your thinking cap on because there's a lot going on in this film. It is Tarkovsky unleashing memories at you in a good way. And yeah, Mirror is my number 2. Next up, my number 1, you probably guessed it already, but my number 1 is Stalker. I love Stalker. However, wasn't always the case. Just going to be blunt. Stalker was a film that when I saw, I think it was, I'll have to go on Letterboxd. I think it was 2017 when I watched Stalker. And I thought it was solid, but I just really wasn't vibing with the pacing of the film. But that being said, some of the imagery, I just couldn't get out of my head, so I decided to revisit it. I bought it on Criterion Blu-ray because I wanted to watch it a second time in the best quality possible. And I watched it a second time, and that's when it clicked, that this is a great film. I absolutely love it. When not going to spoil anything, but when certain characters go from one area to another area and the color palette changes, it floored me. I loved it. I mean, again, seeing all of Tarkovsky's work now, it's not the first time that he delved into like, different color palettes. Because I mean, with he would do it later on with nostalgia, but here I think he did it best, where he changed the color palettes and it really kind of showcasing the transition of like two different areas in a great way. Stalker is very thought provoking. It's very philosophical, and a lot of times Tarkovsky's characters delve into philosophy, and sometimes it doesn't work. Other times it works. And I have to say, Stalker, for me, it really works. Like when these characters are talking about the philosophy, I buy it. And not only do I buy it, but I'm really invested in it. I've seen it twice. I would definitely be revisiting it again. That's why I own it on Criterion Blu-ray. And in my opinion, it's my favorite Tarkovsky. And that's why it's my number one. All right, that was my ranking for Andrei Tarkovsky's films. Now, if you're new to the channel, I do like to talk about the director in terms of if I like him or not at the end of the video. And Andrei Tarkovsky is someone that I do like overall. I admire and very much so respect his ambition as a director, his emphasis on, philosophy, especially with the characters bantering back and forth about it. Nuclear discussion of, and also like the aftermath of with what happens involving that. I mean, it's brutal stuff, and it makes sense too given the time period with when his films came out and with what he had to go through and everything. But I also really respect just his sound mixing. I really like how he doesn't really have any scores, and don't get me wrong, I love film scores, but I also admire when a director is very innovative with trying to do different techniques. And here he was using nature-based sounds to really kind of try to emulate a score, and I thought that was something that really worked, especially water. I gotta say, his films really go for it in terms of like having all these elements where you're like, oh, like I don't know about anyone else, but like in his films when people are walking in puddles of water and everything, and I'm just like, oh man, it's like it's kind of hard to watch. And I'm like, man, it's like so. His films are so wet, but like again, he's someone that I see him as a director that his work requires multiple viewings to fully appreciate, at least for me personally, based on my experience with some of his work. And that's why I said earlier that there will be some of his films that down the line maybe I will revisit and maybe my ranking will change. But this is my ranking now. So yeah, overall, I like Andrei Tarkovsky, but I will say he's a director. You have to be in the right mindset, I feel like, because of his slow pace. Particulars that he has with his directing style. But overall, yeah, I would recommend him as a director. And yeah, I'm very curious to hear your guys' ranking. Let me know in the comment section down below your ranking. Guys, as always, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget the subscription, notification bell, follow me down Letterboxd, and I will catch you guys later.